Hi, everybody. So I'm using a fancy document camera today, and I just figured out how to make the book appear. And without making you guys seasick, I'm just going to kind of leave it here. So you're just going to have to listen to me as I talk. Okay, so we're going to kind of continue with our nonfiction unit. So we guys think about the very first lesson we did together. We talked about how nonfiction can be complex, and we kind of focused on three big areas: text structure, main idea, and how parts fit together. So we're going to continue taking that work into new heights, this time to continue investigating how nonfiction becomes more and more challenging. So I feel like getting better at nonfiction is like getting better at, say, a video game. You need to be able to master higher levels, and those higher levels have harder challenges and require different strategies. So I think that you will find when you read nonfiction, complex nonfiction, every part of the process is a little different than it is when you read simple, straightforward text, starting even with the way you orient yourself to the text. So today I want to teach you that when readers orient themselves to complex nonfiction texts, they use text features and their knowledge of the topic to help. But as you begin reading, you also need to live in the gray area for a while to tolerate confusion, knowing the focus of the text may be revealed slowly. All right, so this work will not be easy. And I want you guys to first think back to some of those animal nonfiction books you guys probably read in third grade at some point. Might have been about a penguin or whatever it could be. Chances are when you glance at the table of contents, so that very first page that tells you what each chapter is titled and all of that, you would know exactly what the text was teaching you just by reading those titles. So you might have heard the saying, things are rarely black and white. So when people say that, they usually mean things are rarely clear. They're not usually either this way, black, or that way, white. So that's how those books were, black and white. These books that you guys are reading are what we're going to call a gray area. There's no crystal clear area, crystal clear answer. It's a lot of confusion. So you might find that the introductory paragraphs might not spell out the subtopics to follow. The complex text you'll read will often require you to live in that gray area where things aren't totally clear. So that means that you'll have to postpone that closure that you usually feel and do some hard work before you can form definite ideas about your text. All right. So let's now move into our sample text together here. Okay, so we are going to start looking at a nonfiction book together called Zombie Makers. I'm going to, again, do my best to make sure I get everything in there. There we go. That's better. Okay, so our text is called Zombie Makers, True Stories of Nature's Undead. So let's figure out how this text seems to go. So I don't know about you, but when I see this word zombie, I think of a show. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, called The Walking Dead, which is all about zombies. What's interesting is, I know nonfiction is true, but I know zombies are not true. I mean, right? They're not really real. So I'm wondering how this zombie connects to this nonfiction book. If they're not real, why are they in the title? Also, I mean, look at gross little insects here, right? I can't tell how many there are here, but there's some insects on the cover. Not sure how insects have anything to do with zombies, because last I checked, I don't remember seeing a lot of insects in The Walking Dead. All right, so let's kind of read the title again. Zombie Makers, True Stories of Nature's Undead. Oh, okay. So we're actually lucky because our nonfiction book has a subtitle, so a smaller title that kind of goes under this big title here. So the second part, True Stories of Nature's Undead. So that suggests that the book might teach about animals in nature that come back to life somehow. I mean, that's what undead is, right? Well, maybe that could relate to this zombie idea because zombies are undead. So maybe there's bugs in here that come back to life. Okay, that could be interesting. So I have a physical book in my hands. I'm going to look at the back cover too. If you're reading digital, you guys obviously will not have a book you can flip over. So it's might be there, might not. So I'm going to go ahead, since I have it, and read that little blurb or section on the back of the book here. So in addition to the title and cover, it helps to show the blurb because it kind of helps you piece together the book's topics and anticipate some sections. So it says, are there things that can take over the bodies and brains of innocent creatures, turn them into senseless slaves, force them to create new zombies so the zombie makers can spread? Absolutely. And they're closer than you think. All right. So it looks like this book teaches about things can take over bodies and brains of creatures. They kind of said that here. So I'm not sure what creatures yet, but that definitely does make sense now to the zombies because that's kind of what happens, right? So that can be definitely interesting. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show this cover again. So we're talking about senseless slaves. Let's see, I'm going to read, okay, the inside cover here because it also has another section. I know it's kind of hard to read for you guys. Okay, so it says, are zombies real? As far as we know, dead people do not come back to life and start walking around looking for trouble. See, I told you they're not real. But there are things that can take over the bodies and brains of innocent creatures, turning them into senseless slaves. Meet nature's zombie makers, including a fly enslaving fungus, a suicide worm, and a cockroach taming wasp and their victims. Okay, so we can definitely see we're kind of going into a little bit more detail now, right? So they talk about how it seems like we're going to kind of get a sense about what the book is talking about. They fly enslaving fungus, so that could be one of the zombie makers. A suicide worm, that's also interesting. Cockroach taming wasp. Okay, so maybe we're going to learn about how each of these turn their victims into zombies somehow. Okay. So now we've kind of looked at the cover. Let's go ahead and look at that inside table of contents. Remember I said with those books that you guys probably read in like third grade, the titles of the different sections definitely probably made it seem a little easier for you guys to understand what's going on. So let's read our table of contents here and see how this kind of goes here. So the introduction is, are they real? Chapter 1's A Fungus Among Us. Interesting play on words there. Chapter 2, The Worms Crawl In, The Worms Crawl Out. Chapter 3, Can We Eat the Babysitter? Chapter 4, Going Viral. Chapter 5, Try Me, You'll Like Me. And afterwards, Zombie Makers, Why and How. Okay, so these titles are very interesting, but they're also super tricky and confusing. It's not really easy necessarily to pick out what's going to go on here. So this chapter 1 seems to be a little bit more clear, right? A fungus among us. So I'm guessing we're going to talk about that fungus that they kind of talked about in the beginning that has that word in it. Even chapter 2, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. I know in that first section it said that there was going to be some kind of suicide worm that they were going to talk about. So obviously they're probably going to talk about those two things. But as for the rest of these, Can We Eat the Babysitter? That seems a little dark, going viral, Try Me, You'll Like Me. So I don't know how these are going to go here. Not really sure what they could be teaching. Okay, so just to kind of review the work that we did, notice how that before we even started reading our book, we did a couple of things. And I'm going to go ahead and jot those things down so that we can kind of pay attention to that. Okay, so the first thing what I want to do is obviously we want to look at the cover. So we want to see what the cover is about. We want to see the title. We want to kind of see what inferences or ideas that we have about the book before we even start reading it. So we might look at the title. So we might also look at the subtitle if they have one. So our title is Zombie Makers, and our subtitle is True Stories of Nature's Undead. So that can kind of tell us a little bit about what's going on in our book. The second thing we did is we read that blurb. So we had a blurb on the back of our book. If you're reading a digital book, you might find the blurb like on the page or on the site of the book that you're reading. It kind of just tells you what the book is going to be about. It might give you a better, clear idea about how this connects to this title or the cover that you guys are reading. Once you've looked at the cover, you've read the blurb, that's where you want to look at your table of contents. So you want to kind of go in and see what those titles of the different sections are to see if you can kind of understand how the text will go. Now, if your book is anything like the book that we read together here, this Zombie Makers, we'll read more of it later if you guys are interested. Those titles are going to be a little bit complex. You might not know just by looking at them how the book is going to go, and that is totally fine too. You do want to make sure you're kind of skimming through and looking to see what you notice. So that's what we want to do first before we even start reading. So once we've done that, you can then kind of flip through the book to see how these pages look. So I'm going to go ahead and show you just 2 pages here. So I'm going to do the introduction. Let's look at that first page. Are they real zombies? Okay, so look at all that color. It's beautiful. So we have this section here, and it kind of gives a little introduction. Does simply reading that word send chills up your spine? So that definitely kind of freaks me out a little bit. And would you look at that? Look what they have here. The Walking Dead, that TV show is talking about. So they definitely have that connection here. So it seems like, maybe they're kind of talking about here how these insects connect to that word zombie. And look at the page too. They kind of have like blood spatters, I think. So it kind of makes it seem a little definitely freaky, especially because it has that zombie title in it. And you can kind of do the same thing throughout the entire book. I mean, they have a great use of pictures in here. They have really interesting little subtitles, all kinds of things. So this book definitely seems like it'd be a super interesting book to read. Okay, so to kind of sum up the work that you guys are going to do today, you're going to do a couple of things. So today's work looks like this. So the first thing you want to do is you might have already started a book. You might have already read a book, and that's fine. Try starting a new book today and try doing this work together. So you might first orient yourself to the text, which is kind of like what we did here. So look at the title, look at the cover, flip through the pages, and kind of get an idea about how you think the book will go before you even start to read it. Then go ahead and move into reading time. So once you've looked at the text, go ahead and move into this reading time where you are reading for 30 minutes. I have a timer for you guys on the slide, so don't worry about timing yourself. Once you've read for 30 minutes, then you're going to do some writing about reading. So the writing about reading really just depends on what you guys want to talk about today. So what makes sense to the reading that you did? Some of you might choose to write about main ideas. So is there some kind of main idea in what you've read? Is there something that you think the author is trying to teach you? Some of you might notice text structure. Remember, we talked about chronological, cause and effect, problem solution, compare and contrast, or different text structures. Or you might summarize, so kind of just, retell what you read. Something else you guys can do is once you look at the text, you're orienting yourself, you can ask yourself, were your predictions correct? So if you thought your book was going to go a certain way, were you correct? Based on what you looked at, based on how you oriented yourself, were you correct? So those are just a couple of things you guys might choose to do today. Really, the work depends on where you guys are at, what work makes the most sense for your reading. But try to orient yourself to the text first, get an idea about how it goes. Do some reading, write about reading, and then turn in your work for a day. All right, so good luck, happy reading, and we'll be in the Google Meet if you guys need us.